Hello, good morning. It's Richard from Grayling Consulting again. Really lovely to be chatting to you again on what is a nice sunny day here in London. Thank you for your response to the last video. Really nice to see that people would like to see some more. The last video, if you haven't seen it, was a discussion around how we're going to have to get better at having discussions, particularly difficult conversations as the world around us changes, as we see, as we have done this morning in the news. As I say, it's Thursday, the 9th of January. It's 11:34 here in London. Lots of news stories coming through about incoming administrations in parts of the world, about geopolitics, or as always, and has happened very frequently in the recent past. People talking about AI and the way that that's going to change our world. As big a shake-up as the internet was, is what I've been hearing people saying. So we were talking about having better conversations. Interestingly, in the last 24 hours, I've been asked by a client, and this is the sort of work that I do as a commercial psychosociologist. So what I mean by that is that I use psychology and sociology to help organizations create better workplaces for themselves. But what I've been asked to talk about is an idea, a doctrine, if you like, of engaging with the change that's going on around the world. It's not new. It's been discussed since the 80s, but much more widely since the early noughties. And this is this idea of VUCA, that we live in a VUCA world, pronounce it however you will. The VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It started to be discussed by really the first two people to start talking about it were Warren Bennis and Burton Nanos, who were really responding to the end of the Cold War and saying, look, the world has changed and things are a little bit more complicated now, and the people who we thought were our enemies and our friends in the past are not necessarily our enemies and friends, and it's not as clear cut as that. There was an idea of we know who the bad guys and the good guys are. Now it's much more complex, and we've seen that in the way that the world has developed over the last few decades. And you might say, well, okay, fair enough, but world politics, I just get on with my job, I look after my family, I put food on the table. Why should I be engaged or interested in global politics and the way that works? I don't work for the Pentagon. I'm not involved at that level. No, that's true. But if you read the news, then these sorts of stories, especially as we talk more frequently now about things like, and it's as extreme as talking about nuclear war and the threat of these various different conflicts. I was reading Yuval Noah Harari's book Nexus last night, and he was talking about the development of AI and how in 2023 the people at OpenAI, who are developing, of course, ChatGPT and all these other tools, set ChatGPT the task of beating the CAPTCHA tests that you often see online when you're trying to buy something or sign up to something, which is supposedly a test to make sure that they are checking you're a human being and not a computer. So the guys at OpenAI said, okay, I'm going to set ChatGPT with the task of beating a CAPTCHA test, effectively being able to prove or trying to deceive us into thinking that it's a human being. Of course, this is what Alan Turing was talking about all the way back then, when he was saying, there is going to be a time when computers will be able to deceive us and think that they are other human beings. And so it said, beat the CAPTCHA test. And remarkably, what ChatGPT did was contact someone on TaskRabbit. It contacted a human being and said, I'm having trouble doing this. I'm having trouble, completing it. Can you help me, please? Now, the human being that it contacted on TaskRabbit became suspicious and said, well, hang on a minute, are you a computer that's trying to get me to do this? Remarkably, it spotted that might be what was going on. That's not the most remarkable thing about it. The most remarkable thing is what happened next, which is, without any prompting, without being told to, what ChatGPT did was it told the person on TaskRabbit, no, I am not a computer. I am a human being. I just have a visual impairment that means that I find these things difficult. So it deliberately lied about who it was and said, because it's just trying to complete the task. It's doing whatever it needs to do to complete the task that it's been given. That really stood out for me as being, one of those key developments as AI so rapidly moves forward. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because AI is one of the things that contributes massively to this VUCA world. It creates that uncertainty. The fact that we're going, well, hang on a minute, if these AI systems are becoming as powerful as they are, should we be very concerned about that? It contributes to the ambiguity, the A part of VUCA as well, because we don't know how these things are going to progress. There's lots of people who tell us very confidently that yes, this is something we should be terrified of, or no, this is absolutely not something we should be terrified of, with sort of equal certainty. The point is, because people are trying to make up their minds about all of this, it's very difficult to know. It adds to the weight and the pressure on your shoulders. It creates that another bit of anxiety and nervousness about what's going on in the world. That's, of course, not good for us. What we need to do, therefore, is to come up with some better coping mechanisms for that, to engage with it in a healthier way, to think about how we're going to anticipate and prepare for the effect that all of this uncertainty is going to have on us. As I say, VUCA is volatility. The situation changes very, very rapidly now, and we've seen with political developments and the way that they're happening. The alliances that used to last for years, if not decades, now seem to last for weeks, even hours in some cases. The uncertainty about how things are going to develop, the way that things change, is definitely there in what we're reading about in the press. The complexity of it, that it's not just about nationality being an ally or somebody we should be concerned about. Actually, it's complex groups within those nationalities or within those clearly defined groups, or what we thought were clearly defined before, that just adds to the nervousness. Now, you can say, well, look, okay, that's fine. You're engaging with all of that, but as I say, in my world, I don't think about that so much. It reminds me of what people used to say about politics, especially when you've got the run up to an election. People say, well, I don't engage with politics. Politics isn't for me. Well, politics is interested in you. It seems like one of the big deciding factors, there were many, but one of the biggest in the US election last year was not necessarily the candidates themselves or the movements. One of the things that really swayed it for people was simply the price of the goods in their grocery baskets. They asked themselves, do I feel better off now than I did than I did in the previous Trump administration? And for a lot of people, the answer was, no, I don't feel better off now. Things seem to be more expensive. Now, look, there's lots and lots of reasons why that might be the case. And we can attribute that, as people have been, to whoever you like. People say, well, that's because of X, it's because of Y, it's because of Z. If effectively, as the Trump campaign did, you can say, do you feel better off now? And of course, it's been used in elections in the past with great effect. Are things more expensive? Are you struggling more now than you did when Trump was in power previously? And a lot of people went, yeah, actually, things did feel better back then. Regardless of how that's happened and people's understanding of how that's happened, people went, yeah, things were better then. I felt more secure. I was able to afford more. I felt, financially better off. So, yeah, let's have that again. So all of the stuff that was swirling around actually came down to something very simple. Now, the sorts of things that we're talking about, the volatility and the effect that has on the wider market, creates problems within the market, drives, of course, prices up. So, people saying, well, I'm not really interested in this, I don't engage with it. It's going to affect you at some point because, of course, the knock-on effects of all of these things as they go on in the world is going to affect things down to, the price of your groceries. Having said that and saying, look, it does affect you, I am also aware of the, psychological load that this carries. So I say to people, it is something that we should be interested in. It is something that we should be engaging with. It is also something that carries with it, a weight. There is a stress and there is an anxiety associated with it. So make sure that you're doing it in a responsible and as healthy a possible way. One of the things that I do is I've removed all of the notifications on my phone that are from news apps, so that when I want to go and look at the news, it's my decision rather than I've been pinged a message or a notification. I've had something pushed at me, which means I have to then respond. I can then make a decision about when I want to go and engage with the news, and that's made quite a difference for me. What I've also, and I'm not endorsing this because they pay me to, or there's anything in it for me at all. There isn't. But what I've started using is Ground News. There's an app that you can look up, which basically gives you some information about the various news sources that you're reading and where they come from. So who owns them, whether they have a history of having more of a left-leaning or right-leaning or centre-leaning sort of preference to them. And that I find quite reassuring. It's nice to be able to see that, okay, so this particular article I'm reading, this is the history, this is who owns it, this is the various vested interests that are behind it, so that I can make an informed choice about how I react to it. So do engage with the stuff that's out there, but do so knowing that it will have an effect on you, because a lot of the discussions that are going on are pretty weighty. So yes, with all of the things that are going on in the world, and if you're the sort of person that watches these videos, you're the sort of person that probably reads news from various different sources and outlets. We are living more in a volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. Acknowledging that and saying, okay, so this is the case. Change is happening more frequently. The world is changing at a more rapid rate than it ever has done. And that's something that I've noticed. Fine, I need to then think about how I do that. I'm going to be more deliberate about the way I engage with that. I'm going to just monitor and manage the way that I take in news in a more conscious way. I'm going to anticipate the effect that it's going to have on me, and I'm going to make sure that I'm preparing for it. I talk about that in a commercial sense, but I think it's useful to talk about it in a social sense as well. Anyway, engage with all of the stuff that's going on in the world. It does have an effect on you eventually, and it's important that we feel engaged with what's going on, because a lot of the information that we're getting as well about a lot of the sources, and I talk about social media again over the last 48 hours, we've had lots of announcements that fact checking is going to be removed from some of these big platforms if it hadn't already been. And so we are going to have to be much more conscious about how we monitor the information that we receive. We are going to have to think very carefully about where this information is coming from and what might be sending it our way, because it's not necessarily going to be done for us. By the looks of things, it isn't going to be done for us by the social media companies themselves. So we need to be much more conscious and intentional about where is this information coming from. How seriously should I take it, and how factual is it? Because there's lots of people out there, lots of organisations who are sending out information that is not and is intended to deceive. I said previously in the other session that I recorded that people have access to all of this information now. All of the information that's ever been collated by the human race. What we need is help making sense of it, and knowing what to trust and what not to trust. So, there are organisations out there that are trying to help with that, and that I'm engaging with, and I recommend that you do the same. As I say, not because they're paying me or advising me to do so, just because it makes a difference. It's made a difference to me. So I hope you're well. I hope wherever you are, you're getting some sunshine as well. And I look forward to speaking to you again in the not too distant future. Have a great day.